Mercy Ships was an organization that was started, I believe, in the 1970s, where they take these old cargo ships and reconvert them into hospital boats, and then take these boats to remote places around the world near coastal cities to provide aid to countries that just don't have good enough medical care and resources. And so he was going to be the chief photographer and storyteller to basically capture the experiences and stories throughout the ship during his time. And on his first trip, he ended up going to a country he had never heard of, Liberia. During this time, I believe this was in the early 2000s, he went to Liberia right after they ended their civil war. It's a country that used to be very close to the Americas. Their flag is almost identical to ours. It is a majority English-speaking country with a very, very rough economic economic structure. Within the first day of getting there, they had over 5,000 patients waiting to be screened, and they only had 1,000 surgical slots to be filled and scheduled. So they set up these screening processes, they set up all these people, and they slowly screened everybody. The main thing that this company focused on was tumors, facial dysformalities when it came to either growths, cleft lips, and a bunch of other stuff. They also helped with orthopedics, eyes, and a bunch of other illnesses that are very common in these places. And within the first day, they probably screened over 1,000 people. One of the first kids he saw was a young man with a tumor that was the size of a volleyball on the side of his face. And he had to take these pictures and screenings, and sadly they couldn't even say yes to all these people. Depending on some of the situations, they could only take tumors if they were benign. They could not take them and treat people if they were cancerous. And so there was many people they ended up having to turn away. By the end of the day, thousands had to leave. And between witnessing all the pain and suffering and all these people that wanted hope and help from these doctors, Scott ended up being very overwhelmed. And by the end of the day, considering everything he had witnessed, he broke down crying, witnessing the sorrow and the pain of all these people and wishing he could do more. And the doctors that he met there, one of them in particular, Dr. Gary, who was a doctor that wanted to volunteer for a year and ended up spending 30 years on these ships. I believe he's still there today, or at least in the time that I think he wrote this book. And he told him that you gotta... What is it that you're thankful for? Me personally, I'm thankful for a lot. I'm thankful that I've had clean water, shelter, food. One thing I realized after finding out about Charity Water is not everybody can be grateful for having clean water, because not everybody has access. That's why in this month, the month of November, month of Thanksgiving, I wanted to try to raise $5,000 for Charity Water. I realized I had so much to be grateful for when there's millions of people around the world that don't have access to clean water. I thought in the spirit of Thanksgiving that we could actually give back so people can be thankful for some of the same things we've grown up with our entire lives. That's why I wanted to try raising $5,000 this month. I wanted to be able to give something back so other people can be thankful for the same things I have. So please help me donate to reach my fundraising goal by the end of the month to raise $5,000, where 100% of all your donations will go to developing and giving access to clean water around the world. Every dollar counts, so whatever you guys are able to give, it's much appreciated. It only takes $40 to be able to give one person access to clean water. So let's smash this goal. We're counting down the days till November 30th until the end of this fundraiser. Let's try reaching $5,000. I'm much appreciative of everything you guys donate. Let's hit this goal and change people's lives. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Focus on the hope and the lives they're going to be able to change, because there is so much that you can't help everyone. And It crushed him on the inside to turn so many people away. He ended up spending a lot of time there. He ended up spending a lot of time with the patients. He happened to, at one point on his time with Mercy ships, go out to see these remote villages throughout the country, picking up patients, taking patients home, doing all this stuff. And it was the first time he actually witnessed issues with the water and seeing these ponds and rivers and the sources of water people were using, because there was a division in Mercy ships that actually was building a few wells here and there for a select group of people. And so he kind of got to witness these hand-dug wells 30 feet below, 6 men digging. Extreme back-breaking work. But he also was able to see a lot of good. He was actually able to save one man's life, probably in particular. He happened to be taking another man back to his village and came across this small, I think it was what would be considered a little convenience store, when some man told him about a fisherman that had a tumor. And out of curiosity, they wanted to track him down. They actually ended up finding him on his way back from the ocean, and his tumor was probably one of the largest Scott said he had ever seen. He felt so hurt to see a man so broken, considering he could hardly talk, let alone breathe and eat, that it was such a challenge for this person to even live. And so he kind of made an empty promise, saying that they would be able to help without even realizing it. And he told him that the next day he would come back after dropping this man off at his village to pick him up and take him to the Mercy ship to hopefully fix his issue and remove his tumor. Luckily, he picked him up the next day, got him back, explained the situation to Dr. Gary, and they sat him down for a screening, took a biopsy of the tumor, and it was, thank God, it was benign, and they were able to schedule him for surgery. Sadly, though, the man was probably only, I think they said, about 70 pounds, and because of that, his blood and body was so weak that they had to give him at least 2 weeks to kind of recover, recoup, and try to put on a little weight so he had enough strength to make it through surgery. And he actually ended up staying on the ship through Christmas, and Scott and him ended up creating a decent bond. While Scott was actually on the ship, he was not only taking pictures and trying to basically capture all these moments from the field. He was taking pictures of all their experiences from Mercy ships. He was taking pictures of before and after pictures of patients. He not only was doing that, but he was writing stories of particular people or situations that he was involved in and learned. So him and Harris, which ended up being the man he found in the village, ended up creating quite a bond. He said he even, after a while, learned to understand his form of muffled English and watched Shrek with him, which he very much enjoyed. And luckily, they were able to perform the surgery, and there was no issues. And Harris had actually asked them to let him keep the tumor so he could really show it how it felt, and used it as a punching bag after he woke up after surgery. Sadly, the nurses did not allow this, so he personally asked the nurses if he could take it to the incinerator, and before throwing it into the fire, he yelled at the tumor for causing Harris so much harm. It took him a few weeks to recover, but shortly down the line, Scott was able to then take him back to his own village for a reunion. Everybody was so impressed to see the dramatic change in Harris, and that he was actually going to be able to live a normal life. He was going to be able to eat. And it was actually shortly after his surgery, he actually talked to Dr. Gary. Dr. Gary said that if we did not bring him in, he probably only had a few months to live. He was either going to starve to death or suffocate. So slowly but surely, Scott was realizing the impact he was having on all these people's lives, and that he did have to focus on hope and not have a famine mindset. During his time on the Mercy ships, he was able to witness so many miraculous changes to these people's lives. He witnessed kids being able to basically change and not become outcasts. He, after all these surgeries, and you see it in the before and after pictures, the joy in these people's faces, because in a culture like this, most in Liberia, most of these people are banished. Almost, they're outcasts of the community. That people believe that the reason they have these are because of curses, and because of that, most people are actually threatened to be killed. And to be able to make such an amazing impact on these people's lives, it's able to change their whole social interactions with everybody, making them not feel different, making them not feel isolated, and bringing joy to these children and even these adults. And it was just such an amazing story. He actually ended up serving a second term with Mercy ships and going back to Liberia the next year. It was on his second trip to Liberia he actually met two doctors that had volunteered to basically work in all these different hospitals around Africa to help train, teach, and perform surgeries that some people aren't eligible to do. One man was from America and the other one was from Britain. And as they were talking, they talked about the stuff they did at Mercy ships. And these doctors were like, it's amazing the work you guys are able to do. But he's like, the amount of money you guys are putting into the operations of keeping a ship running, these generators, supplying all this stuff, food, everything. He's like, you might as well just build a new hospital. But the thing that first caught Scott's attention to realize what the main issue might be is that these doctors were talking about how overwhelmed the hospitals are. And they said the main thing is the water. He said you could dramatically change the amount of people that end up in hospitals because of disease, sickness, illnesses, parasites, tumors, anything, just from having clean water. He said almost 53% of the people in Africa that end up in the hospitals are preventable, all from a clean water source. And at the time, it blew Scott's mind. He didn't believe them. He didn't think it was really true. He's like, there's no way that changing that could have such a dramatic effect on how many people ended up in hospitals. And it wasn't till at least a year later that he realized the full effect of it when he was able to look into it himself. That fact would be the thing that then sparked what would then become charity water.